And we're live. Welcome to Don't Be Coy. I'm your host, Unkle Lew, and today I have the honor, pleasure, and the utmost appreciation to have with me today, Miss Taylor Floyd. Taylor, thank you for being on the show. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How's your week been?
Pretty good. Just catching up from being back home to Florida over the weekend.
Okay, that's good. That's good. So, for the people at home, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So I am originally from Jacksonville, Florida, a little bit outside and kind of in the suburbs. Moved to Seattle recently, almost about a year ago now, for work. Had an amazing opportunity to come out here. And pretty much since then, just been trying to adjust to that change and learning and growing what it's like to really be an adult on my own for the first time.
Yeah, no, that sounds really good. That's kind of what I want to talk to you about today, as far as like settling into a new chapter in your life. So, I know one thing that you're doing is just beginning a career. How has that been going for you?
Yeah, honestly, I will say it's been pretty tough. Just because before I was in healthcare, I was actually a literature major, like super niche. I was in East Asian language and literature, specifically in the modern period. And so coming from that, which is a really undefined, like free space to create and think, which I think is where I flourish, versus the very prescribed and like rigid world of business and management. That adjustment has been difficult for me, and I think just kind of how I think. Another thing too is that this is my first time navigating having like a salaried position. I mean, I've worked since I was like 15 years old, but it was always like, however many part-time jobs at the time to, get by and do what I need to have to do. So in that way, kind of like learning almost like a culture, a way of life, and how different it was from the way that I was raised, and kind of just sometimes stopping and thinking to myself, like, this is really how I live right now, and
Yeah.
things like that. So in that way, I think that's been the most difficult part, I guess, would be a way to say it, in terms of just rewiring my brain and making that adjustment.
Yeah, no, I can totally understand that, as far as that big shift towards like starting off and getting your undergrad in like literature and moving into like this kind of rigid environment of healthcare. Would you say, like, from the expectations from what they were in your mind to what the reality is it a little bit of what you would anticipated, or is it a little bit different?
Yeah, I mean, it's totally in line with what I knew it was going to be. I think the biggest disparity in expectations would probably be of myself. I think I've always known kind of, the way that I think and the environments that I've done well in, and kind of stayed within that comfort zone. And I've always done so well, in anything that I've done, that I've never, really questioned any decision that I've made, no matter how big of a change it was. But I think by far this was like the most humbling experience of, for the first time, being challenged as a person, if that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think, like, when you're starting out new chapters, there's always like growth opportunities, especially when you talked about being from Florida and now living in the Pacific Northwest, and like all of these different types of growth opportunities, not only for self, but just community in itself as well, right? And like building that base and building like who you are as an individual person. Like, how would you say like you've capitalized on some of those growth opportunities?
Honestly, I think the biggest way that I've really, tapped into those has been learning to lean on others. I think when I first came to Seattle, I was alone for about 2 months. I moved here ahead of time and I literally knew nobody. And so after that isolation, I really became so comfortable in that space, especially after being so independent, growing up and up until this point in life. I think I had gotten too comfortable being alone. And so when I came to work and I started working and I realized how much I was struggling to really feel like I was fitting in and like I was being successful, And it really wasn't until I started reaching out to people and people started linking me to things and networking and things like that, that I started to realize like that was the helping hand that I needed to really get into that space of learning and growth. And mentorship has been like the biggest thing for me, especially mentorship from, someone who looks like me and came from the same background as me, and how much that's enriched me, professionally and as a person too. I think in that way, that's the biggest way that I've, learned and grown through the time that I've been in Seattle so far.
Oh, okay. Well, that's really cool. So like, I kind of want to touch on that a little bit, like your time whenever you first got here, maybe about 9 months ago, compared to like your time now. Like, what would you say is the biggest differences between like your personal and professional life then to compare to like now?
Yeah, professional life, I would say it's a lot nicer now that I know I for sure have like found my people. Like I know I have people in my corner. I have like a good team behind me. So in that way, I don't feel as isolated as I did when I first came. And I also think I feel more comfortable. I got a lot more confident in terms of being able to be honest with those people who are in my corner about things that I'm struggling with, things that I'm feeling, and sometimes just having to have those difficult conversations about I really don't know what's going on right now, and those happen a lot. And then I guess personally too, I truly think that I'm nowhere near the person that I was before I came here, just because I think that those 2 months that I was alone was like life boot camp, basically.
Yeah.
Like when you're just stuck in like a studio with no car, no friends, like nothing to do, nowhere to go, like no community, nothing. And you're just totally shut off and you're just sitting there with your thoughts all day long. You really, really confront all of the things that you put off for a really long time.
Yeah.
And so in that way, I really struggled during that time, but I came out so much better afterwards. Like I really felt for the first time truly content. Like there was a lot of, before I think I felt, I'll say quote unquote, happier. As in, I always had lots of friends. I always had lots of things to do. But I think a lot of it was just escapism from really dealing with things that I probably should have a long time ago. So in that way, that period of time by my own, kind of like, Emerson's novel Waldo, when he was like by himself and just contemplating on things. That's really how I felt. I felt like I was having my Waldo moment, but like in a studio apartment in downtown with like somebody yelling down the street, like outside of my window. So in that way, I think I grew a lot personally because I was actually able to confront a lot of things with myself and actually have some uninterrupted time. Like for the first time since I was 15, and I'm 24 at that time, 25 now. So like 10 years of just working and really like looking forward and pushing forward and never stopping, like never pressing on the brakes, just like gas to the ground, and really having that first time without having to worry about work or getting up and things to do. Like also that lack of purpose, I think really helped me figure out, what are my motivations in life? What are the things that I like doing when all of that is taken away? All of those things that I have to do. What do I want to do?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And, I really like what you talked about there between like the differences between the personal and the professional. But like a common theme that I hear you saying is like finding that comfort zone, whether it was personally where, you had to endure some of those growing pains and understand like really and truthfully just building your own self and like re-engaging with who you are now as a 25-year-old adult, and then also professionally and like setting yourself in that new career and understanding those growing pains as well. I'm really curious from your perspective, like if you don't necessarily mind sharing, like what that actually looked like for you enduring some of those growing pains. Because I think, we all go through this kind of incubator period where we're in like a little bit of flux and where we don't necessarily know to go up, down, left, right, either of those type of things. But I think it's really interesting that you said taking that time to pause. So I'm curious around what some of those lessons that you learned through those growing pains that you've used to actually turned out to be assets for how you use them now.
Yeah, for sure. So kind of like I said, and actually, I think the real breaking point for me was actually I had a meeting with someone, and it was maybe the second time that I had talked to this person, and immediately they clocked me. They were like, I can tell you're a person who has done nothing but just work and look forward and was just pressing, but you don't have any direction. It's like, I didn't care if I was moving forward or if I was spinning out, as long as I felt like I was doing something.
Yeah.
And that was really, really hard to realize, because I'll kind of tell like a little thing is that my brother went to Princeton University, and when he came home, he had like his little like, slang or whatever that he had picked up from there. And so one of them was NARP, which stands for non-athletic regular person. And I was like dying laughing about that, because I was like, oh my God, that's literally me. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just like a normal person in terms of like, my brother has sports. My sister's an amazing, amazing, talented artist. So there's people that have like those demonstrable talents that can be channeled into some type of medium. But truly for me, I think my talent has always been my work ethic and the way that I've pushed myself to succeed. Like, that's where I feel talented. That's where I feel successful. And so when those things are taken away, and you feel like you truly are like not contributing anything, because I wasn't working at the time. So who am I then? And like, it's something so simple as like, do you know, I didn't even have like bathroom mats in my bathroom, because I didn't even know what color I liked. Like, I put off making the decision of buying, like bathroom stuff, just because I was like, I don't even know who I am anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know like who I am without all those things. And then also the other thing too is that because I was, I loved being in school, I loved being a learner. Like, I think that I had like that cloak of stability around me of being like a student. And so graduating from grad school and knowing like there's no more school to be had, that was tough too. So that was another huge piece of my identity taken away. And the last thing as well was that I think another huge sense of purpose for me was with my family. As in, I was the one who sacrificed to stay home close to everyone. And, if something were to happen, I'd hop in my car, I'd drive the hour and 15 minutes back to Jacksonville from UF, And so now being 3,000 miles away and an 8-hour flight away from my family, having that accolade of like being that person who steps up in like those family situations, that was just like another badge ripped off, the vest. And so it was like when all of those things were stripped away, it was really tough. Like, there was a lot of tears. I think there were some moments where I was like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. Like, is it too late for me to go home? Like, I'd just be sitting up on like my laptop and be like, how much is a flight home from Seattle to Jacksonville right now?
Yeah.
And I truly think that like I guess the closest thing, just to summarize, is that it just was like, it broke me. And coming out from that was when I started to have people extending their hands to me, reaching out that hand and being the person to like pull me up from like those shadows, like that shadow work,
Yeah.
That was when I started to come out of like, I did that time, in like the prison of my own mind, I guess. And then it was time for me to come out and be a member of society again. And it was rough too, in that transitionary period between like, okay, like I'm back out, I have things to do, I have a job, I'm starting to make friends and everything. And that companionship and that sense of belonging and, knowing that there's that comfort in the solitude now, it's not scary anymore. I guess just for anyone who like also is going through maybe like that piece where they're like, oh, I'm like never going to come out of that.
Yeah.
For me, it came in time, and I think it came organically in the right timing that it was supposed to. And I think that was like the first time in my life that I didn't feel the need to control it. I just let it happen. And that was a really important lesson for me too.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I think one of the things that's really interesting that you talked about is like earlier on when you talked about your talents, right? And like one of your talents being like a direction or driven individual. And so like what I'm curious about is like these kind of experiences that you faced here in Seattle. Like, was that something that you kind of intentionally did? Because there's a reason why you came out here, right? Like you knew that you wanted to pursue your career. You wanted to put yourself under circumstances that would grow you professionally and potentially take your career to the next level. So like some of these different things, were they some of the expectations that you felt that you were going to put yourself into? Or was it something that was just like, oh man, what did I just do?
Yeah, no, I think it was a little bit of both, honestly. The reason that I came out here truly, when I strip away like the job offer, the reason that I came out here was because I started to feel like if I didn't get out then I never would. And a big thing for me is that, you know, all of the women in my family, you know, historically speaking, like going back to like my mom, my grandma, thinking about the sacrifices that they made in terms of staying in one place, you know, for whatever reason that was, for family, for children. And I always remember growing up, like the biggest piece of advice my mom gave to me that like stuck with me forever was take your time and, you know, maximize the life that you have, seek out those opportunities for yourself. And it was rough coming out here because I think she didn't anticipate when she gave me that advice that it would encapsulate me moving literally across the country. So there's a lot of family pain there, you know, on both ends of, you know, me struggling with, is this right of me to leave? You know, do I have the right to leave? Versus this is what I know I need for myself, or else I will just literally be complacent the rest of my life. So in that way, like I said, when I strip away, you know, the generic answer that I usually give to people of, you know, oh, I got a job offer. Truly the reason was because I knew I needed to push myself in that way. I knew I was taking comfort in the confines of the people that I knew, the places I had always been, the comfort of being able to hop in the car and, you know, go see my mom, go see my family within an hour.
Yeah.
And I knew that I needed to take that away and that it would always be there if I wanted it. But I knew that I needed to have a period of time where it wasn't there.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like you mentioned that you just came back from home. So what does that look like now? You've been in Seattle for like 8-10 months, you would say. And like you've gone through a huge transition period, right? Where I don't know if do you know your favorite color now?
I do. Yeah, it's green. My bathroom's green now.
Okay. So you have your favorite color now, and that's a good sense of like who you are as a person and building that identity. So like going back home, like what does that look like for you now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a totally different vibe for sure. Like knowing that when I come someplace, it's not easy for me to know when I'll be able to come back next. It's not easy for me to get there. I truly think, like, I really believe in the, you know, maxim absence makes the heart grow fonder. Like, it's really not, it's almost like the time is more meaningful and I'm more deliberate with the things that I do and the people that I see and, like, you know, who I give my time and energy to now that I know how precious that time is, you know, with like PTO constraints and traveling constraints and, you know, making sure I get to everybody while I'm home. I definitely think it helped me reprioritize, you know, like what's really important to me. And it definitely wasn't easy either. I think I'm still learning what it means to be someone living far away from my family. Yeah. In the way that, like, when I came home for Christmas, which was the very first time I came back from Seattle since I had moved, there was definitely a little bit of like, contention about the fact that I also spent quite a bit of time visiting friends. And it was because I felt, you know, I wanted to see everybody. I felt obligated to see everyone. I wanted to fit everybody in on the trip if I could, because, you know, I didn't want to come home and have anyone feel like, oh, Taylor's home. I wasn't important enough for, her to visit me. So in that way, there was a lot of pressure in that way where like every single time I come home, I feel like I got to let everybody know, at least just put it out on the table so that people don't think that I'm like deliberately ignoring them and things like that. And that's just like the people pleasing in me. That is a part that I'm definitely still working on. But from like a family point of view, I think it's definitely different too. It was an adjustment for my family for sure, because they had leaned on me for a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And so in that way, it was also kind of learning to set boundaries with my family and giving myself permission to do that.
I love that. I love that a lot. So like we've talked a little bit around like, how you were when you first coming out here and like building at where you at right now. I kind of want to focus on that a little bit on like, how do you define yourself presently?
Yeah. I don't know. I think I'm still definitely a work in progress. I think I'm starting to find that person that I am, get in the bathroom organized. Like it's silly, but it really is like a metaphor of like, just even a simple decision such as that. I just felt so overwhelmed by like that. I felt so overwhelmed that I didn't even know what to do, that I couldn't even pick up a color. Like, girl, it's like a $10 bath mat. Just buy it and take it back if you don't like it. Like, it's really not that deep. But it was deep in the sense that it was like really forcing me to confront, I didn't know who I was. And the fact that up until that point, I really had kind of just been comfortable going along with whatever, my friends were doing at the time, whatever my family was doing at the time. I had thought I was such an independent person until I came here and was forced with like those, literally just day-to-day decisions, and I was crumbling under them.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. We all talk about how we want to be, how we're all independent. And like, there's especially in our culture and like, especially in our age group, there's like a pride in being independent. But like, there comes a lot with getting to that point.
For sure.
And I think one of the challenges is that confronting like what that independence means. It's not just like paying your bills, which, is a thing in itself. Sucks.
Yeah, for sure. Trust me.
Yeah, for sure. But confronting the whole sense and like our identity and that independence and like understanding who we are in a person when we're alone and not have our family or our friends or significant other to lean on. So I'm curious around like in that kind of still state where you were like figuring yourself out and all those kind of things. What are some of the tools that you utilize to help identify like green is my color?
Yeah, for sure. So I think a lot of it had to do with, for the first time, just feeling like I had the space to implement the things I had been working on for so long. So I go to therapy. I'm totally, not afraid to be transparent about that, because I really think it's important in the destigmatization of like, you never know what somebody's story is, what someone's journey is, or what therapy might mean to them. So I go to therapy. I went to therapy for 5 years. And during that time, I was taking everything in. I understood everything. I could see everything very clearly, because that is one thing about me, is that I'm like almost to a fault realistic with myself. I'm very self-aware.
Yeah.
And so in that way, I was taking everything in, but I felt like I was just never had the capacity. I never had the stability to actually implement those mechanisms, those coping mechanisms, those tools. And so even though I was in that space of really feeling like that was like a, I guess for lack of a better term, like an all-time low of just, like really having to face myself for the first time, I also was on my own. So left to my own devices, there wasn't any lean on my friend or call my friend to come over and let's just do something else and forget about it. I was forced to use those tools. It's kind of like, if you get dropped in the forest by yourself, you could watch all of the survival YouTube videos of like the dudes who build stuff in the woods, you know? But until you're actually put in that situation and you're forced to, you don't ever really push yourself to implement it. And so that was my thing. I was dropped in the forest by myself, and it was like, make a hammer out of those twigs and that rock, or sink, you know?
Yeah, no, I really like that. And I really like your analogy because, like, one of the things, and just to be transparent as well, is that I go to therapy as well. And so, like, one of the things that, like, I like to talk about, and like that metaphor of the forest, is that's how I like to describe my anxiety. Like, the common state, the calm state, that's a plain meadow. But when I enter the forest, that's my anxiety, because that's when I'm into a place where I don't necessarily know what's left. I don't know what's right. The forward and the backward just seems like everything is surrounding me and surrounding me at one place. And so, like, what I'm curious about is, with you and talking about building out a hammer out of those twigs, like, how were you able to implement those, or what was that first kind of trial, if you will, that you were like, okay, this is what I need to do. These are the tools that I need, and this is how I'm going to do it.
Yeah. I think the first thing was when I realized nobody was coming to save me. When I was like, I can't just call somebody and ask them to get on the plane and come 8 hours. So like that was off the table. And then I think I also slowly started to realize that, like, I was skipping out on like activities of daily living, like taking a shower, brushing my teeth, eating. I lost a bunch of weight because I literally was just like a vegetable on the couch. And I have this term for like this thing that happens to me a lot. I call it scribble brain, where I feel like I can't unwind the yarn of my thoughts in my head. And there's sometimes that I can, and a lot of times I feel so overwhelmed with all of the things. It literally just feels like this little like gif of like scribbles in my brain. And so I was having really bad scribble brain, and I wasn't thinking straight. And then I remember very distinctly of like, it took forever for me to get a couch because I didn't have a car and I didn't know anybody to be like, hey, can you take me to the store? And so I remember I was like I had one rug from IKEA, one rug on the ground. And I was like laying on my back and like looking up at the ceiling. And I was like, when was the last time I like saw another person? And that was the very distinct memory of when I was like, something's got to change. Like, I got to do something about this. And so it kind of started with like just getting out and walking around the city. And that was like my first step. And then once I did that and I started, you know, exploring and seeing that I was fine, like another day would come, I would go about my business. I could even do fun things. And then, you know, with that, friends started coming. You know, I had started knowing the lady at the H Mart by my house, who like now she sees me every day. She's like, girl, you're back here again. Oh my God. And just little things like that, like learning again, you know, there are reasons to pick up those sticks and make something out of them. Those are the reasons to do that. Like otherwise you just sink, because what's the reason? What would it be for anyways? So finding those little reasons to pick those sticks up, finding the reasons to make that tool, finding the reasons to use that tool towards something. I think finding that motivation again was, you know, really how I started unlocking those things that I'd been learning during those 5 years. Yeah,
no, that's a really beautiful way to articulate that. And just to keep on going with this metaphor. So we're in the forest. You've built a few tools. Like, I would say that you're pretty much thriving there. You have everything that you essentially need. I guess the question that I would have for you, what is it that you're trying to build within the forest? Because you intentionally brought yourself here in a sense of saying, like, as your driven individual saying, like, okay, I have these goals. I want to not be stuck in Florida, if you will, but be able to explore the world and just see how that is. Like, what is the ultimate goal to what you're trying to build this towards?
Yeah. I think when I think of that metaphor of, you know, being in the forest, I think back to the one time that I think in my past, at least, you know, since before I came here, when I really looked and I was like, God, this is just a beautiful moment, was when I was studying abroad in China and we went to go see one of the local mountains there. And I looked up and I just saw, you know, we had been driving for some time to get to the top. and I was seeing all these little like scattered communities throughout. And I was like, this place is beautiful. There's so much life around, and all of these people have their own lives. And there's so many people who are different than me that I will never intersect with in this gorgeous, gorgeous place. And that moment was so poignant to me that I think thinking about that metaphor of like, you know, I'm thriving in the forest. I have my little campfire. I know how to fish. You know, I've got some seasoning growing out back. Like, you know, thinking about that metaphor, I think the ideal state would be once I've done that, I have the option to go to the road and go see my neighbors or go to the town that's right outside of the forest, having the option to do that, but not feeling like I need to. That's the success to me.
Yeah, no, that's a really beautiful way of articulating that. So like to escape the metaphor a little bit, what does that town look like for you personally or professionally?
Yeah. I think for me, it's really important for me to be around different people. You know, going back to that like really poignant memory I had of back on the mountain in China, of just I'm so fascinated and humbled. And honestly, it makes me feel better to know how small I am. Because then in turn, it helps me understand that if I mess something up, in the grand scheme of things, it really does not matter. There's people living lives that I will never intersect with, and so many different things happening all in synchronicity throughout the entire universe, not even just here on Earth. And so thinking about that town, I think that looks like diversity. It looks like people who are living different than me, who bring something new to the table. And I think that's what I was really trying to escape, letting myself doing, is just staying in the same place with people who think the same and have always been there. And, you know, just being in that comfort. I think that town looks like kind of like Seattle, I guess, where there's lots of people who have come from different places and people coming and going, some just here for a week, some people here for years. I think it also looks like, you know, how towns have little shops. There's different resources and tools, which could be metaphors for skills and things that I pick up, different things to do. I think getting out has been really important for me, especially given, you know, like the COVID era, it's really hard to give yourself permission to go out and feel like you're not like, you know, trying to compromise anything, or, you know, whatever perception might come along with however you're choosing to like lead your life in the pandemic. So yeah, to me, I think the town looks like that place I can go in, go to the little corner store if I need to, stop in on my friend who lives down the street and things like that. But then at the end of the day, I got to go back to the forest and be on my own and fend for myself. And I think that dichotomy is incredibly important. But it's those people that you meet while you're in the town, you know, that person who might just be passing through. It's that knowledge, and also, again, just like that reassurance of you're where you're supposed to be. You are one small piece in like this grand fabric of life. For some people that might feel scary, but for me, it's quite comforting.
Yeah, no, I really like that. I think that, you know, one of the things that it makes me think about is just like, you're in the midst of this chapter currently, and like thinking about what that particular next chapter could look like. And so like understanding like who you are as an individual, and like how you're intersecting or interacting with just not only yourself, but how you can take the lessons learned from each one of these particular chapters in your life to grow it and become a overarching individual. And so like, I guess I think that that's just a really beautiful way of just articulating that in summation. And like, I really appreciate you just taking out the time to just share your story and all those other kind of things.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, of course. So if you don't mind, I do have a few lightning questions that I like to do on every episode. So
Okay.
if you're ready, I can go ahead with those.
Go ahead.
All right. What is your favorite relaxation or self-care activity?
Watching TV.
Ooh, what's your favorite show right now?
Right now, I really like Outlander.
Ooh.
I love like the escapism of it, but also like the historical elements. I gotta have like a little bit of reality. Like I said, I am Virgo Mars at the end of the day, so I do have to have a little bit of logic put into.
What is your best book recommendation?
Ooh, I really liked a book by Maxine Hong Kingston that I read, and I can't remember what the title of it is right now, but it was so good and it was so transformational for me. And basically the book is about her feeling the pressure of her family's expectations of her being a first generation immigrant. And I cannot for the life of me remember it.
Yeah, no, that's cool though. What's it called? I'm pretty sure with the title we could be able to find it later on.
Yeah.
And one person you want to thank for your journey thus far?
My grandma, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. She passed away in 2018, and truly her passing is the reason that I am here today and the reason that I've been able to go on this journey. And I think that the message that she left behind and the weight and responsibility in a good way that I feel to carry on her legacy, carry on her memory, and also show her that all of her investment into me, you know, she basically raised me so that she can see the person that I become and know that she had an incredibly huge part of it, that I wouldn't be here without her.
Oh man, that's absolutely beautiful. Well, thank you for taking out the time, and thank you for just being vulnerable and transparent with me today.
For sure. Thank you.
This has been another episode of Don't Be Coy with Unkle Lew. As always, I'd like to thank this episode's guest for a great conversation, as well as thank you, the listener, for joining in. Whether you're a first-time listener or a regular, I always appreciate your support. If you like today's episode and ever want to listen to more, subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. And to join our community and access future bonus content, be sure to visit dbkpodcast.com.